Hello, friends. I'm Vanaja Vijay Kumar. It's a wonderful world out there, and our life is a boon to us from God. We should try to make the maximum of the fortune bestowed upon us. Death is inevitable, and so are problems in life. Yes, life is also a challenge. It needs courage, guts, patience, and tolerance to come out successfully and be happy. It so happens that surroundings and situations sometimes make it so difficult for us that we tend to think that we have reached the optimum that we can bear. It is then that we need a shoulder to lean on, someone who would listen patiently to our laments, someone who would boost up our spirits and lift us out of our glooms. Well, it is easier said than done. Yet there are people who have come out of this phase and manage to lead their life as joyful and blithe as a lark. So let's all hang in there, for tomorrow is yet another day. Today I'm going to narrate a story about a person who had given up and then, after passing through a severe crisis, learned to live all over again. The title of the story is My Second Innings. Here it goes. The sun was setting beyond the horizon. A hue of color spread across the sky. A tint of orange combined with fiery red, an array of bright yellow with splashes of mustard, crimson, and burgundy. It was a sheer delight to watch. Slowly but steadily, the sun seemed to sink, and darkness spread out its tentacles, clawing every inch of the space that it could move itself into. Ritu, my daughter-in-law, had returned from office just then, and I could hear her freshening up as she gently hummed one of her favorite numbers. Soon the fragrance of coffee came drifting into the balcony where I was chilling on my rocking chair, looking up at the sky. There seemed to be a cluster of clouds shrouding the sky, and miraculously through the haze I could see a few stars peeping out, shimmering and twinkling, as if to say, "Hey, thanks for making time and looking up at us." Had I gone out of my mind? Or did I actually see one of them sort of winking at me? As I pondered upon this fact, I heard gentle footsteps approaching me, and I turned to see Ritu walking in with a tray upon which were some biscuits and a steaming cup of coffee. She set the tray on the tufted ottoman with a wide smile on her face. "How was your day, Amma?" she asked. "Pretty good, dear. I guided Venky in cleaning the kitchen shelves, and I made sure she put back the things exactly as you had arranged." "Thanks, Mom. What would I do without you?" She bent down to give a small peck on my forehead and went back to attend to the kids who had come back from their evening games. I flipped back the pages of my past and started recalling the days when we were looking for a bride for my son Vignesh. My husband Dinesh had been a leading medical practitioner, and he was well known throughout the city of Calcutta. His philanthropy, gentleness, kindness, and concern for his patients earned us a very good reputation, and perhaps because of his patients' blessings, we were lucky enough to get Ritu as a daughter-in-law. She is from an affluent and highly cultured family. Her qualification, combined with her skills, soon earned her the position of the CEO of her company. Well, I have to introduce myself at this point. I'm Padma. I got married to Dr. Dinesh at a very young age, and my entire world revolved around my son and husband. I had dreams of becoming a classical singer, and Dinesh did encourage me to go for it. But I declined, saying that I would rather concentrate on running our household. Dinesh found it very tough to spend time with us due to the rush in his clinic, and I had to come to accept the fact that his profession was noble and society needed his service. So I was very greedy and selfish about the time that I got to spend with him. I clung to those hours as if my very life depended on them. As for Vignesh, I had to play the part of both his parents. I attended his parent teacher meetings at school. I accompanied on his outings. I sat down with him for his homework. I was his best friend forever, in whom he confided about his first love, his crushes, and all the problems in his life. In fact, his entire childhood was just me and him, with brief interaction with his dad during the short weekends. Dinesh worked on Sundays also. Seemingly, he was supposed to work half day, but somehow all Sundays stretched late into the evening. Looking at him, being so tired and weary, I would just ask him to have his dinner and slip into bed. Thus, days ran into years, and before the bat of an eyelid, Vignesh had crossed his teens and had become a full-fledged engineer himself. He left home for a span of 2 years to complete his master's in the US. The house seemed so empty without his bubbling presence. The void in my life was so deep and intense that my heart wrenched in pain. Somehow, I insisted that Dinesh accompany me to the US for his graduation ceremony. I think that was the only ever holiday I got to spend with my spouse in all my years. It was just wonderful to be back with Vignesh. Luckily for us, he did not hanker after the American dream, and we brought him home with us. Soon, he got into a partnership with one of his friends and became an entrepreneur. Once he started drawing in a steady income, it was time to think about finding a life companion for him. Like I said earlier, we got lucky there and brought into the family a beautiful, brilliant, and ever smiling Ritu. I was in the habit of going to kiddie parties and generally heard the women there comment about the delicate relationship between a mother in law and a daughter in law. I would shrug them off, saying that it was a beautiful relationship and I would be able to get along smoothly without any hassles. Well, it was soon time for me to prove myself true. Rito sailed into the household like a gentle breeze and settled down wonderfully. She was a loving wife to Vignesh and the adoring daughter that we never had. After the wedding celebrations came to an end, the monotony of life began. Everyone was back at work. Dinesh at his clinic, Vignesh and Ritu at their respective offices. The comradeship that had blossomed between me and Ritu seemed to have fizzled out. She had no time for me anymore. In fact, whatever little time they had, the kids seemed to want it for themselves. I was nowhere in the picture in their lives. The regular hello and bye at the breakfast table, and the pleasantries we exchanged before departing from the dinner table became the only source of communication. I had expected to embellish in the glory of my son's and daughter in law's company. Instead, here I was, restless, frustrated, and gloomier than I had ever felt before. To the world outside, I seemed to be the luckiest person, a caring and beloved husband, a successful and adoring son, a beautiful, polite, and well mannered daughter in law. What more could one need? Why then these feelings of unrest within me? Were they foresights of the future to come? Was something evil to befall us? My state of mind was so chaotic that I could not think straight. I wanted my family to be around me, pampering me and bestowing all their attention upon me. But none seemed to have the time to spare. I tried to involve myself in charity, reading books, spirituality. I even made an attempt at being creative and started to write, but I could not concentrate. I picked up fights with everyone for petty reasons. Dinesh tried to cheer me up as best as he could. He even stopped going to his clinics on Sundays and spent time with me. Somewhere the cord seemed to have broken, and I tried to seek relief from my tormented thoughts by consulting a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist put me on tranquilizers, and this seemed to help me a lot. I slept peacefully through the nights. My nagging and battering of Ritu persistently made her cold and unresponsive to me. The more I provoked her, the more she revolted into her shell. She barely communicated, but was polite and very calm. She inquired about my well being and saw to it that I was comfortable in every way. My next appointment with the psychiatrist went well. Since Dinesh was with me, the doctor asked him to take good care of me. He said the tranquilor had to be slowly weaned off. He asked me to make the most of my life as I did not have any serious commitments. He advised us to spend more time together and go out on vacations. That was something that was out of the question, and everything came back to square one. Dinesh assumed that I was weaning off the medicine and had gradually stopped taking it. Unfortunately, the chaotic mental condition of mine hit back with full force. Gradually, I tried to seek relief from my melancholy strains and my anxious state of mind by silently taking a few more of my tranquilizers. The drug constantly put me in a state of drowsiness, and I slept oblivious of the fact whether it was day or night. This, to some extent, relieved my other family members. They assumed that finally I had come to terms and switched to being my old self. It did not strike to them until too late that I seemed to be intoxicated most of the time. My speech was blurred and face was bloated due to lying down all the time. I had the prescription for the pills, and every time I ran out of them, I sent my driver to get more. The pharmacist was an awe of Dinesh and provided the pills without any hesitation. It was the doctor's house that needed them, and it was completely out of league for him to question. So time went by, and I became more and more addicted. Meanwhile, Ritu was in the family way. I tried helping her during her phases of morning sickness, but the warmth between us had been snuffed out and she failed to respond. Self pity and agony swelled within me, thereby building a barrier between all of us. Life seemed to go on, each of us preoccupied with our own daft routine and meaningless schedules. Happiness seemed to have left us in a lurch. It was time for Ritu's delivery, and she left to her mother's house. I awaited the arrival of my grandchild eagerly. I even tried to ease and relax the number of my pills that I was taking. One evening, Vignesh ran in excitedly. "Mom," he shouted, "you know what? You and Dad are grandparents now. Ritu has delivered a baby boy." He quickly packed his bag and boarded the next possible flight to Bhubaneswar, where Ritu's parents lived. I called them up to find out how Ritu and the baby were doing. Ritu's mom said that Ritu could not deliver normally and hence it was a cesarean. Ritu applied for a transfer and planned to shift to Bhubaneswar as she felt she needed her mom by her side. I was deeply offended. I tried convincing her that I could take care of the baby while she resumed her work. Sadly, it was to no avail. Poor Vignesh seemed to have no say in the matter, and he accepted the fact that he had to keep shuttling between both the places. Everything seemed so messed up. In all this commotion, I barely noticed that Dinesh seemed to have slowed down. He seemed to be in lots of pain. Vignesh and me took him for a checkup and he was diagnosed with leukemia. The doctors were very upset for bringing him in so late. They put him on intense chemotherapy treatment. Waves of guilt pangs traumatized me. How selfish I had been. Drowned in self pity, I had neglected and ignored Dinesh. Had I noticed earlier, he could have stopped the spread of the disease. I'm still surprised why Dinesh did not think of getting himself checked. He, being a doctor, should have realized that something serious was going on in his system. Why, oh, why did he not let me know that he was not keeping well? I could not bear the torture and pain he underwent throughout his treatment. Very soon we learned that the deadly disease had spread to his lungs and his days were counted. I was devastated. My whole world had turned tipsy-turvy. As Dinesh struggled and waited for his last breath, I lost all sense of sanity. My head started spinning with multiple thoughts, overlapping one over the other. How will I survive without Dinesh? I had taken him for granted. His silent but solid presence had been the very source of my being alive. I could not imagine a life without him. I had reached the zenith of patience and tolerance. I could not bear any more of this terror and misery during this phase in my life. I excused myself from the hospital on a lame pretext and returned home with a decisive and firm plan in my mind. I had recently refilled my stock of the drug that I had grown addicted to. Without any second thought, I went to my medicine cabinet and emptied the entire bottle into my palm. I then fetched a glass of water and took them all in one large gulp. Just then I heard the ear-splitting ringing of the doorbell. It went on ringing and ringing with a stubborn intent. It kind of brought me out of a trance and made me wonder at the disastrous and drastic deed that I had done. What the heck? Why wouldn't it just stop? Why couldn't the person at the door just leave and let me die in peace? My throat began to get parched. My head began to reel. I was feeling so dizzy. My stomach behaved oddly. Was that a tinge of fear gnawing and tugging at my heart? What lay beyond the streak of lightning and darkness that kept flashing before me? Instinctively, I started to stagger towards the front door. I opened it, and through lazy eyes, I saw Ritu standing at the threshold with my grandchild, his eyes sparkling and a wide grin spreading across his chubby cheeks. Remorse and regret pummeled me. I realized how stupid I had been. I tried to reach out to him, but could feel myself slowly and steadily plummeting down to the floor. I vaguely heard Ritu screaming as if from a long distance, and that was the last thing I remember. I woke up in a strange room. A nurse was checking the monitor beside me, and I realized I was in a hospital bed. I tried to raise my hand to remove the obstructive mask on my nose, but I could not raise my hands. I could not feel my hands at all. Fear, terror, and all kinds of emotions flitted across my mind. I started thrashing my legs helplessly. The nurse hurried towards me. She held my legs and asked me to calm down. She then removed my mask, and I yelled out in great fear, "My hands! My hands! What happened to them?" The nurse spoke in a matter of fact voice and said, "Ma'am, you have temporarily lost the use of your hands." "What do you mean?" I retorted. "You were brought in by your daughter-in-law after you had succumbed to an overdose of a drug that you had been taking." "What drug? Whose daughter-in-law? I don't remember anything." I tried to recall, but in vain. The more I tried, the more my head seemed to ache. I went into a seizure, and the nurse hurriedly called the doctor. The doctor rushed in and, after checking my vitals, put me to slumber with a shot. Well, to cut a long story short, let me put things in a nutshell for you. The side effects of my overdose were simply horrifying. It paralyzed both my arms and put me in total amnesia. I could not remember who I was. I could not recognize Vignesh or Ritu. I was in a turmoil and completely surrendered. I was in a turmoil and completely surrendered to the care of the doctors and nurses. I was told that Dinesh had passed away a week ago while the doctors were fighting to save my life. I had become something akin to a zombie. I could not realize the seriousness of the situation that I was in. People visited me saying they were my relatives, but I barely knew who they were. Vignesh and Ritu discussed my future plans without Vignesh and Ritu discussed my future plans, wanting whatever was best for me. One of the rehab specialists suggested an excellent rehabilitation center nestled in the foothills of the Nilgiris. It is a heavenly sanctuary for the disabled. Many patients who get admitted there, utterly helpless and totally dependent, come out of it, fully prepared to lead almost normal lives in society. This institute has multi-speciality doctors who deal with various disabilities and help the patients to rehabilitate and get back to normal lives. I spent 5 years of my life here, learning to use my paralyzed arms and underwent continuous therapy to get back my memory. I noticed once during a visit that Ritu was in the family way. By then, I had got back my memory, and the doctors and therapists were working on my hands. Time sped by, and this time Ritu gave birth to a beautiful girl. The baby had inherited Dinesh's eyes and nose. My eyes brimmed with tears. If only I had been there by Dinesh when he left this earthly abode, holding his hand, promising him that I would take care of his family, his son, his daughter-in-law, and his grandkids. He would have died peacefully. Regretting the past actions will now lead us nowhere. So I decided I would work hard and try to revive the use of my limbs to the level of doing my own tasks. Gradually, I was able to use my limbs so much so that I could manage to do all the required amenities by myself. There came a day when the doctors waved a green flag and told me that I was ready to go home. I was no more a handicapped person. I thank the Almighty for giving me a gem of a son and daughter in law. They never lost hope. They did not give up on me. One of the nurses even suggested that I was stranded at the institute for good. According to her, the younger generation considered the elderly as a liability and a burden. I nodded and said, I have learned to take things on the stride. Even if that happens, I would continue my stay here and be of service to the more underprivileged. I was glad that I had got rehabilitated. I have been de addicted from the pills. I have learned to deal with all kinds of calamities. I have learned to appreciate the good things that God has given me. And above all, I have learned that there is nothing that cannot be solved by interacting and communicating. So here I am back at home, happily gazing at the stars. Yet another wink from that naughty star? Was it by any chance Dinesh? I smiled at it, thinking about what a wonderful person Dinesh had been. Suddenly, two soft and fluffy objects flew down to my lap, each trying to get seated more comfortably than the other. Here are your grandchildren, Dinesh. Look after them, bless them, and save them from all calamities. The star blinked bright thrice as if to say, Oh, yes, I will, I will. Grandma, Grandma, tell me the story of Cinderella, said my little granddaughter. No way, Harry Potter, said my little grandson. Okay, my little darlings, you will get a mixture masala of both the stories. So here goes. Once upon a time, there was a little princess called Cinderella. She lived in a big castle. Right next to it was yet another big venue called the Hogwarts. They fell asleep listening to the story. Vignesh took them in and put them to bed. While I waited for dinner to be served, I introspected about how I had lost so many golden years of my life. They was many, and if only. Dinner calls, and I'm off to sit and eat with my son and his lovely wife. As I look at them, I feel so blessed and thank God for all his abundant mercies. It has not been an easy journey for me to reach here, and I wonder how I'm going to fare in the future. I've joined a group where people like me exchange their experiences and learn from each other. Yes, dear listeners and readers, it is a continuous learning process. If you feel that you are under too much stress and feel that you are at the end of your tenterhooks and that you need to escape, then take a deep breath, for it is time to seek help. There are many help groups who are willing to listen and prop you up. There are chances for the darkness in your heart to fade and enable a streak of light to penetrate. Hi, this is Vanaja again. Friends, like the Padma in my story, there are many more people in this world who are combating restlessness and seeking a way out of the intricate maze in their minds. Please, please, if you happen to come across one of them, try to help them by just being there for them. This will surely make a difference. Thank you.